Hey there, sports history fan. This is Arnie Chapman, aka the Football History Dude, and I'm here to tell you about an awesome way for you to rub elbows with your favorite podcast hosts here on the Sports History Network, while at the same time rooting for your hometown team this upcoming NFL season. You've been hearing all about our partner, Tailgate Fantasy, the past few weeks. Well, dig on this. Tailgate created a special Sports History Network league for our listeners, so we can put the word fan back into fantasy football together. It's free to join, and if you do so before the season kicks off, you'll automatically be entered into a drawing for a free t-shirt from one of our other partners, Home Field Apparel. It's a win-win-win! So hurry up today and head to sportshistorynetwork.com/tailgate for all the details. Again, that's sportshistorynetwork.com/tailgate.
Blog Talk Radio.
Tonight, we'll go back in time to seasons past, when 22 men graced the rugged fields of yesterday, fighting for one more first down, one more yard gain, one final score, which would bring victory after 60 minutes of battle on the gridiron. Tonight, we'll explore the world of Gridiron Greats. Welcome to Gridiron Greats Football History and its Memorabilia on the Gridiron Greats Publishing and Broadcasting Network, in conjunction with Swick Enterprise. We're live from the Wallingford, Connecticut home of Gridiron Greats Magazine, and I'm Bob Swick, publisher and editor of Gridiron Greats Magazine, and I'll be your host for the show. Gridiron Greats is the only publication in America which focuses upon the history and memorabilia of the North American football game since its inception in 1869. We cover 140-plus years of football history and memorabilia, and you can find us on the web at gridirongreatsmagazine.com. We're sponsored in part by MSB Sports Cards. Check out their website for one of the largest selections of vintage football and vintage football memorabilia. Check out their website at msbsportscards.com. And we're also sponsored in part by BST Auctions. Become a new bidder if you haven't been already, and check out their latest information on their upcoming auctions. Check out their website at bstauctions.com. At this time, I'd like to introduce my co-host. He's a senior contributing writer to Gridiron Greats Magazine, a football memorabilia historian specializing in pre-World War II items, in particular Red Grange, and also Seattle Seahawk items, in particular Steve Largent. He hails from Portland, Oregon. I'd like to welcome Mr. Joe Squires. Joe, welcome to the show this evening.
Captain, good afternoon, sir.
And how are you doing this afternoon?
Not bad. Raining here in Portland. What else is new?
Well,
we're kind of known for our rain.
I want to lead off the show tonight by talking about a very interesting auction that occurred a little while ago. And we talked a little bit about this in previous shows, and we talked about it via the phone also. There was a Joe Namath 1965 Topps rookie card, graded PSA number 9, and it sold for $264,000, including buyer's premium.
Yep.
Why?
I am definitely not the demographic for that. No doubt about it. It seems you and I offline have talked a few times about, it seems like prices are starting to go up on things. Hall of Fame rookie cards, especially in higher grades, they used to be a little more, accessible, and now they're not. Take for example, Nagurski, PSA 8. If you want one, you probably can't find one. It's not available. Just because there's 6 of them out there doesn't mean they're for sale.
Right.
It used to be the same thing with like a larger rookie card. There were 4 of them when I started getting into collecting, and I tried for years to find one. Couldn't find one. And a Namath 9 is the same. There's people out there, and present company included. I used to be one of those who wanted the highest grade card I could afford. There's people out there who want the highest grade, and I can rattle off about 3 names I can think of. Museum of Sports History used to be one. It's just there's people who want the highest, and some of these are collectibles. I mean, they're not making any more of these things, and if you can find one,
opinion,
that's it.
Joe, in your opinion,
Yep.
is this good or bad for the hobby? And I got mixed feelings on it, one way or the other. So
you've been wearing off of me lately, Captain. I mean, I used to be a set collector. I sold off quite a few of my high grade sets several years ago, and I used to collect wax packs. And after speaking to a couple guests, I stopped collecting wax packs when I had two people in 2 shows in a row say half the wax out there is probably resealed or doctored in some way.
right.
I pivoted my collection several years ago, thanks to a couple of the boys at MSB, to be more rare than condition sensitive. The populations on some of these cards is going to go up. I mentioned Largent rookie card. I had the 5th Largent rookie card in PSA 10, and now I think there's like 17. So I'm not saying there will be more Namath 9s appearing, but there's a possibility.
But again, we'll look at the difference in the years and the amount printed and the amount that's still floating around there.
Yep.
It's very possible there's still unopened packs of some of the 7 floating around that are buried or whatever, and people still have it, and they break open that pack and they pull a pristine, beautiful card and send it to be graded. Obviously, as we go back to older cards, we'll see less and less of the better condition cards coming out in the market. I mean, in all the years I've been collecting, I look at the 35 National Chickle, and I never had any Chickles graded, but probably my best Chickle that I actually bought over the years was probably in near mint condition, and would have probably graded a 6 or a 7. I really have never seen perfect National Chickle cards, as far as I'm concerned, because they possibly could have been altered and or improved in some way. And I'm saying to myself too, how many really lasted that long, type of thing. So then we can tie in with this incredible figure for this Namath card. What then are the rarest sets that are out there in the football card market? Something else we talked about in the past too.
And it's tough. It's tough. What this price on a PSA 9 Namath does to the hobby, in my opinion, is bad because it shines a light on money. And when there's money, there are card doctors. There are nefarious people out there who I wrote an article for Gridiron Greats about the 48 leaf set. It's probably one of the most doctored sets out there, and I would say the Chickle is close behind it. So here's $250,000 plus for a PSA 9 Namath. We know that there is a very subtle difference between a really high-end PSA 8 and a slider PSA 9. So how many PSA 8 Namath cards are going to be broken out of slabs, have a little bit of polish put on them, and or trimmed or et cetera? So how many card doctors or how many people are out there now scarfing up PSA 8s and cracking them out? So, I don't know. I mean, it's very subjective, the difference between a PSA 8 high grade and a PSA 9. It's very subjective, and sadly the subjectiveness is in California.
A lesser grade card, a 7 or 8, to me looks better than a 9 in some cases. You know what I mean?
I switched my 48 leaf collection from PSA 8 that I started to see a lot more trimming happening to really good looking PSA 6s and 7s. now I'm happy with my collection. I love my 48 leaf set, and I'm about 75% of the way through it in PSA 6 and 7. You know?
And there's nothing wrong with that. If you got a legitimate card, that's what it's all about. And I can, I've looked over my 48 and 49 leafs over the years, and since you started talking about the trimming and whatever, I know I got a couple of cards that are short, but as far as I'm concerned, because of the condition, I know they weren't trimmed. You know what I mean? I think they just came out of the packs at the time, and because of use over the years and storage and whatever, they're just off. And
look what that trimming did to the 48 leaf set prices. You can pick up. There's a PSA 8 Bobby Lane rookie card that went for $50,000. 5-6 years ago. That is now, as a buy it now, for like $15,000 or $17,000 on eBay. Wow. And it's trimmed. Wow. It's very obviously trimmed. It's ugly. Yeah, it's fascinating. So it basically torpedoes it. So, if some people start trimming or doctoring some PSA 8 Namus and they start slipping them into PSA 9 Namus, I my fingers crossed that it doesn't hurt anybody in the hobby or turn people off from the hobby, because at the end of the day, it's a hobby. It should be enjoyable, but money does get in the way.
Right. And again, it bothers me because being in the hobby as long as I have, I've seen literally every fad come and go, and now I'm seriously concerned because if you're going to way overpay for a card, I mean, I can remember people way overpaying for a near mint card versus an X card, so on and so forth. Yeah. Now you're talking about thousands upon thousands of dollars because it's graded, and you got a lousy graded card that you overpaid for that shouldn't be that grade. How really does that impact the hobby? Does it say to the people, the high end collector, hey, I'm done. I could put the same money in someplace else and have a little more legitimacy to it, and have a better investment in the long run. Because you're kidding yourself if you don't think the investment concept is not there as far as PSA graded cards are concerned. I don't care what anybody says.
Without doubt. There was a
lot of people buying them for investments more than anything else.
You're spot on. There was a guy in Denver. Min Yong Son was his name. He opened Rocky Mountain, the Rocky Mountain Collection. What the Rocky Mountain Collection was a hedge fund. It was a hedge fund predicated on buying very rare, high-grade cards. I mean, he owned a couple of he owned a couple Babe Ruth. He owned some high-grade Namus. He owned it. If it was rare and high-grade, he owned it. And 5 years later, he sold them, and his fund did very well. I knew Min pretty well, and I remember when he sold, he's like, well, we had a 5-year shelf life on the fund. I mean, it's a nice collection, but it's got to be sold, to cash people out. He did very, very well. He invested at the right time. So yes, it is an investment. I mean, even when I buy stuff, it's an investment. I sold some of my cards, 4 or 5 years ago. Like I mentioned, I bought a commercial building. When I thought the real estate market was low. So and my commercial building is doing very well. So it's fascinating. But having a PSA 9 card like that, sell for that much is good and bad for the hobby, mostly bad. What I'd rather see is a very, very rare, rare low-grade card sell for a lot, because suddenly scarcity would be trumping, quality. I mean, if a PSA, go for it.
We can use the examples of the Shotwells or the Spaldings or any of those types of cards. They're rare.
Yeah, exactly.
And really find a high-grade card in a high grade, you have something very valuable there.
Yep. If a PSA 4, Mayo Dunlop sold for $100,000, I'd have a smile on my face, because suddenly, you'd be getting rarity over grade. Speaking of rarity, Captain.
Yes.
It's your show.
Well, speaking of rarity, too, again, you're correct in your assumption. I could see any type of purchase of an older card in better grade condition, either graded or raw, And to me, that has much more value in the long run. I feel it has much more value in the long run based upon that. And again, with the market the way it is right now, with that kind of money being chased for those types of cards because they're buying the trade, again, not to sound like Mr. Doomsday here, but it's just, I don't think it's a good idea for that. And I will, complain about it, and I have complained about it for many years now. And hopefully, I really hope one day the market will police itself a little more better and will actually come to grips of what's a real value for some of these cards. Because again, as we all know, I still got my name as rookie from when I was a kid. Probably would grade a 4 or a 5 at the most. And I'll be darned if I'll get that card graded. You know what I mean? So
it's worth more sentimentally than it is, in any kind of holder.
Oh yeah,
So
exactly.
So I brought up. You and I were talking last week before the show about rare cards, and we started rattling off a few, and we decided, before the show to talk about rare cards. So, and for those listening, Bob and I usually call in about 5 minutes early and talk, and we spend the week prior to a show discussing a topic and talking about it. I mean, Bob and I are friends who love talking about football, and then every once in a while we pick up the phone and record it and talk football. It's kind of fun. I've said it before. I have the best seat in the house. So, Bob, I did find that card I was talking about before the show. The rare red Grange card I was talking about.
Okay, hold that card until our next show, and I'm going to do some research on it too, and we'll keep our audience in suspense until that time. How's that sound?
Oh, that sounds good. So next show, rare cards is the topic.
All right. And at this time,
and if anybody has any ideas, email us. Oh, sorry, Bob.
At this time, I'd like to introduce our special guest. His collection has been featured in numerous publications and TV shows over the years. He was on our podcast back in 2012, and he was also our super collector in Gridiron Greats issue number 35. In my opinion, he has one of the most comprehensive and complete collections of Green Bay Packers memorabilia in the country. I am just in awe of it, to say the least. And without further hesitation, I'd like to introduce to our show Mr. Glenn Christensen. Glenn, welcome to the show.
Hey, Bob and Joe, how are you? Thanks for having me on.
Excellent. Excellent.
I want to brief our audience. Glenn, you've come up with a catalog, which you were very generous in sending to me. And after I had a stroke looking at it a few times, and Brenda wanted to know if I needed oxygen or whatever. And then she started looking at it, and she says, well, this is what your collection should be organized like and look like downstairs. And I said, well, we probably need another compound within the compound here to do that. So, Glenn, let me start off with our traditional question. Please tell our audience once again an incredible story of how you got into collecting Green Bay Packer items.
I'll tell you what, Bob and Joe, the collection actually started back in about 93, 94. I went to visit my mom back in Wisconsin. I had moved the family here down to Texas, and we went back there, and, I was an avid Packer fan and my entire life, and that's all I talked about. And, well, I knew my mom was involved with the Packers, but I didn't really grasp how, the depth of it and so forth until, she sat me down and, I heard stories through the years, and I heard, always heard about, Don Hudson sent his card again this year, and, I didn't really put two and two together who Don was and so forth. Now I know he's a good family friend, and I wish I would have known that a little earlier in my life. But anyway, my mom said, Glenn, of all the kids, I think you'd appreciate my things that I've kept from my Packer years, and that was from the early 1940 to 45 approximately, and she was the first majorette with the Green Bay Packer Lumberjack Band, and my mom was a baton twirler at East High School, and Curly Lambeau was in attendance and saw her do a baton routine at halftime, and he said, we need to get a pretty blonde to soften up that gruff lumberjack band. And anybody that knows Curly's past, there wasn't a blonde that he didn't check out. So
Curly Lambeau hit on your mom, Glenn.
Exactly. My last name might have been different than Christensen had things gone different.
Yeah, no kidding.
I think about that often, trust me. A little scary, but anyway, she got a call from Wilner Burke, the longtime director of the Lumberjack Band, and they, she was going to get paid. I think it was $2 a game plus travel expense with the team to go to all the games, and she would perform at halftime and before the game and so forth. And she became a hit, and then subsequently they added some more gals, and it continued all the way through to the Golden Girls, of Mary Jane, who turned out to be Curly's girlfriend years later. But anyway, she sat me down and she gave me letters that the Packers had written to her.
Wow.
And, her programs, her field passes from all of the games, their silk field passes, they were just great. And she gave me her batons. And, I took them back to Texas, and along with a lot of great stories that she told me. And I took them back to Texas, and I said, I can't just keep these in a box. I've got to, I think I'm going to display them in my office at home. And so I tacked up the batons on the wall and framed the poster, or framed the program. This is what I'm trying to say, and the field passes and the letters and so forth. And I thought, well, shoot, I've got stuff from when I was a kid, and I went up in our attic. We don't have basements here, unfortunately, and I still brought my electric football set. Of course, it was Packers Cowboys. We had to have the Ice Bowl represented when I was a kid. And I can't imagine how many times I turned that game on and let those players buzz around the field. I don't think there was a better game. But I had a couple of pennants. I had a single bar Packer helmet and a double bar Packer helmet and pennant, and I had my Packer helmet from when I was a kid, and I think I even had a bobblehead from back then. So I started putting it all together, and little by little the collection started to take shape. And of course, then you start looking for commercially available products that modern day things, I guess, because they're affordable and so forth. And that's what I supplemented my collection with. And but that's how the collection started. Had I known my everything that was involved. My dad was involved with the Packers. He worked for Don Hudson at his car dealership, and funny thing, my dad looked like Don Hudson, and so when people would come in and buy a car, Don would typically give them a signed football, and and so, like a lot of celebrities, he got tired of that. So when my dad came on and he looked like Don, he'd send my dad out, and people would think that it was Don handing him a football. And my dad was an artist, and my dad was with Romo Display in Green Bay when they first did the Packer G decals, and so that whole thing kind of webbed into this collection. When I was a kid, he had packages of Packer G's in the basement, the original Packer helmet decals. And when I was a young kid, I'm 4 years old, I thought for sure one day that the G stood for Glenn. And I stuck those everywhere in the basement while my dad was at work. And I think about it all the time, and what those would be worth today. I bet he had 200 of them, and of course that's my business. I own some printing companies, and I make decals, and trust me, that was one of the things I made when I bought my company. I made some stacks of Packer G decals and put them in brown paper, and they're in my collection to remind me of the mistake I made.
Oh my gosh.
So, anyway,
I love it.
The family has a big connection to the Packers over the years, and that's how my Packer collection started. So,
wow. Well,
long-winded answer.
Hey, the art of storytelling is elaboration, sir. I gotta say, when Bob shared your pictures with me, and my wife and I share a little home office. Her desk is next to mine. I opened up the pictures and I started looking. And excuse me, Bob, but I just went, holy shit. And my wife's like, what? And I'm like, because it's been 6 years since I've seen your room, and I'm just like, look at this. And, we moved about six months ago, and I used to have a room in my basement that I kept, all my collection in. And I go,
Sure.
Well, check this out. This guy's got 2 rooms full of stuff, and now my Largent set is stuffed into a closet in the basement. I mean, come on, sweetie, I need a man cave. And she's like,
there
by the
go.
looks of it, it looks like his stuff is actually worth something. And she turned around and walked out of the room, and I'm like, oh. So,
oh, that's awful.
So I'll be filing for divorce here soon.
There you go. That's ground.
But I gotta ask, Glenn. I mean, you have an incredible collection. What have you added since we had you on in 2012? What have you added since 2012 that you can tell us about?
Well, yeah, I've added quite a bit since 2012. I think the last time we talked, I was getting ready to bust the wall out from my current space, which is about 600 square feet, and I moved into an adjacent room, which added about 150 square feet to it, and I built lockers in there that replicated the new locker room at Lambeau. And I did carpet it. I arranged to get the end zone turf from Super Bowl 45 that was held down here in Arlington. I bought the P from Packers, and because I was at that game and I was in the end zone, right in front of me was Nick Collins kneeling on that P, and I was like, oh wow, wonder where that end zone goes when they're done. And so I called the NFL, tracked it down, and bought it. And so I carpeted that room with the Packer P. And so yeah, I've added quite a nice little room there. And along with that, I added a lot of real estate that I was able to fill up and reorganize. And I've had a ball over the last 5 years working with all this stuff, bringing in a lot of new stuff and getting rid of a lot of items that were, again, commercially, newer age type stuff. I've gotten rid of all of that, and that's all vintage items now. I don't have anything really that's new in my collection. But some of the great things that I've brought in, I've managed to get an actual ice bowl game trophy ball, and that's probably the highlight of my collection. I found a 65 championship trophy ball. I've got a Super Bowl 45 game used ball. I found a 1920s Curly Lambeau equipment trunk, which is
Saw
just
that,
insane
yeah.
to think about it.
Your turnstile was pretty cool between the two rooms. I loved that.
Yeah, the turnstile, everybody loves it. I got that right from Lambeau Field, and it was just being in the right place at the right time on that thing. And I happened to be up from Texas with my truck, and they needed to move it out of the way, and I happened to be walking by, and they said, "Hey, you're a big guy. Help us move this." And I said, "Well, how about we move it down to my truck?" And she said, "Well, we're getting rid of it." I was like, "Oh, my God." So
that is the definition of right place at the right time, Glenn.
Oh,
my gosh.
Crazy. But, yeah, I found, I found a couple of great 1944 blue and gold sideline sweaters from somebody that had contacted me that they found them in their relatives' things. And I'll talk about that later, I guess. But I've got Donnie Anderson's sideline coat and Donnie Anderson's gold Pro Bowl helmet from the 60s. I found a 1960s Packer practice field sign that was up in somebody's garage. They didn't know the printing side was up in their garage, and they'd store their fishing poles and whatnot, up there in the rafters. And they pulled it down one day and said, "Oh my gosh, this thing is painted on the other side." And sure enough, it's the actual practice field sign from the 60s. And it's in a lot of the books that you see. What else did I get? I've gotten an ice bowl and a 66 championship full ticket, one of each of those. I ran into Tony Canadeo's sideline coat, which is pretty cool. It's a canvas coat printed black on the back with Packers, and it's got a fur collar on it, and it's got the number 3 right on.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, how do you know the provenance of that? I was going to say it had the number 3 on it. Okay.
Yeah, it's got the number 3 on it, and it was after Tony had it, Henry Jordan had it, and so I'm friends with Henry Jordan's son. So Henry was his name. So the provenance is pretty strong in that down through the years. So that was a big find. I managed to get Brett Favre's sideline coat from the '95 championship. There's lots of iconic pictures out there of him and Reggie White hugging and crying after that game. They were finally going back to taking the Packers back to their Super Bowl after 30 years, and he's wearing that coat with the number 4 embroidered on the bottom, and I was able to get that. So I think it was 2015, I was up in Green Bay over Thanksgiving, and I'm sitting there at a program that's talking at, and the mayor presents him with the key to the city. And I'm sitting there in the audience like, most people can just go to those things and enjoy themselves, but I'm sitting there trying to figure out how I'm going to get that key to the city. And with Brett. And I told myself, I said, well, someday he's going to sell all that stuff. And, well, sure enough, this last year, actually, I was keeping my eyes open for it. It did come on the market, and I was able to get that Brett Favre's key to the city of Green Bay. So I kept that promise to myself. I found a rare set of 1929 world champion Packer pocket mirrors. They're just incredible old, stiller photographs that are embossed into the celluloid cover of these pocket mirrors, and they are just so extinct. I think there's maybe one other set known in the world. So those were just fantastic to run across. I got Reggie White's 1996 Super Bowl 31 game ball that he was presented for breaking the NFL sack record.
Wow.
I got Jerry Kramer's 1961 player contract, which was pretty cool. I was excited to get, obviously Jerry is a great player and so forth, but I was actually excited to get it because it was signed by Pete Rozelle. I thought, I hadn't had anything with his signature on it, and I was kind of excited to have him, Lombardi, Jack Vanisi, and Jerry Kramer on that, all signing that contract. But other than that, I ran into a couple of team-signed balls from the Curly Lambeau years. So Curly and his entire team have signed the balls from 37 and 38. And, those are things that, years ago I could only dream about acquiring.
Yeah.
And I've really gone above and beyond what I ever dreamt of acquiring with my collection. So my bobbleheads increased from about 40 the last time we talked, and now I've got about 86 of those. And
wow.
Pennants, I've now got 106 pennants that stretch from early 1920s to 1969. So
wow.
Go ahead.
Glenn,
yeah.
I want to ask a real quick question on those pennants because I do enjoy looking at pennants. Do you think you're complete with everything there through the 60s? I'm just curious because I don't really think there's a lot more out there. I could be completely wrong, but I studied what you had in the catalog, and it looks pretty complete to me. So do you have any idea on that?
Well, Bob, I do. I know that I'm missing two. I've got two that I know that are out there because another collector friend of mine has them, and
okay.
I keep
Glenn
sending his wife messages
list
about how much they're worth and hoping she'll tell him to sell them. So it's not working so far.
Yeah, I was just saying, Glenn, you created the comprehensive pennant list, for the Packers. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and that's something that I'm going to be working on, Joe. Actually, I'm working on writing a book on Packer pennants, and I'm going to have what I perceive based on my history and my personal experience with buying them, what they're worth. There's a few books floating around out there with Packer memorabilia and so forth that were written years ago that have, or even there's even a pennant book out there, I should say, that has values, but they're not realistic based on today and what these pennants are really selling for. I mean, some of these pennants are just absolutely crazy. I was getting a kick out of you guys talking about how cards have gone up in value and that they're just so crazy. And man, what Packer pennants have done over the years is just unreal. What, the values have just skyrocketed on these things. So I think it's important not only to catalog them and just for history's sake. I think it'll be cool to have them all cataloged and values on there, and even some history of how the pennants were made and how they were printed or some of them are hand painted. And I think people will get a kick out of that. So that's something I've been working on a little bit. So, yeah.
I think you should really do that because it's a story that needs to be told. And I do agree with you on a lot of pieces of memorabilia, especially pennants. From what I've seen from different price guides and quote-unquote pricing, it's way out of line with what's really being bought out there and how much items are being paid for. And especially the Packers, because it's such great demand. People want them. It's as simple as that. I mean, I got a half a dozen older pennants in my collection, nowhere near yours, but I'm saying to myself, those pennants are very valuable today because you don't see a lot of them out there, and there's always a demand for them, one way or the other.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, there's pennants that are, there's one that comes to mind that in a pennant guide, they have down there for $250, and it will sell for $1,200 to $1,500 every day.
Right.
It's
Wow.
And I was just going to say that it's not uncommon to see a lot of Packer pennants $1,000 plus now. So that's the real market.
It's really becoming
as far as I'm
common.
concerned.
Exactly, Bob. Yeah.
Incredible.
And,
All right,
the Super Bowl
put you on
pennant.
the spot.
No, go ahead.
Glenn, I want to put you on the spot, and I want to move along. What are the top 6 items in your collection, and can you describe them to our audience?
Yeah. Well, I had to ponder that because of the sheer volume of great things that I'm just so fortunate to have here. But I've whittled it down to six items and then a couple of backups here. But for sure, the top thing on my list is my Ice Bowl football and my 65 championship game ball. Both of those came from a Packer employee family. It was in their family for 50 years, and the provenance on it is just insane. They were actually in charge of the footballs and before and during and after the game, and they were in charge of having the footballs lettered even after for the trophy balls. And so, one of these balls were presented to this employee, and for both years. And so they sat in this family for 50 years up until recently, actually. And I was able to get it. And the Ice Bowl ball itself, to talk about that one first. I mean, the ends of it are chewed up from the shards of ice on that field, and it's stained from being wet. And I actually sitting here with the 2 balls right now, and that one is actually easily 15 degrees colder than the other one. It's still cold.
Wow. Wow.
No,
Unbelievable.
but I learned so much through that process about Packer footballs and how they were handled and how they, the demand for the footballs back then was incredible. They had to hustle. Each team got 6 balls in a ball bag, and they had to, at the end of the game, the 6 balls were hustled back in the ball bag and ran into the equipment manager's office where they were put under lock and key, and because people wanted those game balls back then, and so especially for the Ice Bowl and the championship games, that was especially true. But the 65 championship ball that I have is, of course, that was Brown's last game, Jim Brown's last game to play in the NFL, which is pretty neat.
Oh, wow.
And, that was also known as the Mud Bowl, and there's still mud in all the laces of this football, which I'm so glad they didn't clean that part off. The rest of the ball is clean. They had to paint it, but there's still mud in the laces. And anyway, those 2 items I kind of clumped together on my favorites. Those are the kind of things, Joe and Bob, that, I've been to the Packer Hall of Fame, I don't know how many times over my lifetime, and you go through the trophy case and you stare at that Ice Bowl trophy ball in there, and you still stare at the 65 championship ball, and you're like, well, that's one thing that's not on my list that I'll ever see. I'll never get that away from the Hall of Fame, and it never dawned on me that there was more than one. That they did several of these game balls, and to think that I have them is, I've never seen them in 25, 26 years of collecting. I've never seen one come available, and I'm just thrilled that I'm able to have that in my collection. The third item that is crazy is the Curly Lambeau equipment trunk that I have. It's circa 1920s to 1940s, which I guess you'd assume because those are the years Curly was with the team. It's got his name painted on it, and Green Bay Packers, Green Bay, Wisconsin on it. And the provenance on that is just so great. It's a quick little story, I guess. I'll do it real quick. But Gerald Clifford was an attorney with the Packers, one of the Hungry Five, if I'm not mistaken, that really promoted the Packers through thick and thin back then. And so Curly left the team in 1948. The trunk was actually left. Curly left the trunk with the Packers. Well, the Packers were so, there were so many people that were unhappy that Curly had left that, they, even though he went to the Cardinals, they still wanted to treat him like royalty, so they wanted to make sure they got his trunk back. Well, he gave it to Clifford, and Clifford had a different idea about Curly, apparently, and this is all through Clifford's neighbor who ended up with the trunk. And apparently Clifford felt that Curly had run the Packers into the ground. He swore that Curly was talking very seriously about moving the Packers out of Green Bay. And that's when the board of directors decided, enough was enough, and they weren't going to go for that. Curly left, and, the rest is history. But Clifford ended up with, his trunk and Curly's trunk. And so a neighbor, 2 years later, decided to move from Green Bay to Naperville, Illinois, and used the trunks to put glassware in, and saying that they'd return them. Well, by the time they moved there and so forth, Clifford died, and so they had nowhere to return them to, so they kept them. And so they got passed down once in the family. They used them for storing things, in the attic. They had no clue really why these army-looking be of any value. Well, they ended up in a garage sale for $25, and someone with enough sense found them, and the Curly Lambeau trunk ended up in my hands. So
wow,
it's just amazing to me how these things end up in rummage sales and in flea markets and so forth. And even to this day, great things are coming out of the woodwork. But
yeah, do you have one more, Glenn? Or
I did. I'm just getting over to my list. Well, I think I touched on it a little bit already, and that was the Canadeo sideline coat. I that's definitely one of my favorite items. Of course, I've got the '60s green and gold. I've got the blue and gold coat, but this one is just so special. I don't know of another one out there except there's one in the NFL Hall of Fame, and it's definitely a highlight of my collection having that thing, and especially because it was a friend's father's coat from those years, from the early '60s and so forth. So, So other than that, go ahead.
I was going to say that kind of leads me to my question. I mean, you're talking about the breadth of your collection. I kind of had a two-parter. I mean, what's your white whale? What is the thing you're actively seeking, and then how do you get most of the stuff that's in your collection? I mean, I've heard stories from serendipity, walking by while they're tearing down turnstiles, to calling the NFL to get the pee from the end zone. I mean, how do you get that? Which is pretty good.
Well,
how do you get most of your stuff? And then what's on your want list?
Well, good point. Joe, I'm at the point with my collection that I don't really know what else is out there. Every couple of weeks I'll get an email from somebody, and it may be, I run an ad in a great magazine called Gridiron Greats, saying that I'm always actively looking for things. It might be coming from something like that. It might be because, if you Google Green Bay Packer collector, my name comes up a million times. But I get people calling me and emailing me constantly with things, just like the two blue and gold 1944 sweaters. A gal texted me and said, "Hey, these were in my great aunt's possessions. She just passed away. I cleaned out the house, and they belonged to my great uncle who played for the Packers. Do you have any interest in these? And or could you tell me something about these?" And I said, "Whoa, yeah, I sure can." And I said, "They're very rare and valuable. And would you be interested?"
My mom might have worn one.
Well, yeah. That's unfortunately that's what happened here. She said she would be interested in selling one of them, and I gave her what I valued it at, which was, I always give people extremely fair prices.
Yes.
I will not lowball people. I don't believe in that.
Yes.
I just think everything has a value, and you've got to sleep at night. And
yes.
She basically started crying over what I told her, and so she was able to look at it as an inheritance. She was able to put it in. She had nothing saved up for her little guy that was going to be going to school someday, and it made her day. And well, anyway, I ended up buying both of them once she figured out how much they were worth. But the point is, these things are starting to find me more than I'm looking for them. The ice bowl, ball in the 60s, same thing. Somebody just decided, hey, I wonder what these things are worth, and they feel good about the stuff going to my collection. I'm really happy about that. I'm happy people that it's not a pawn shop or something. You know what I mean? It's I've got a museum basically, and they feel good that their stuff is going to be safe. But again, to answer your question, I honestly don't know. Unless I find a pair of Bart Starr's cleats, or Vince Lombardi's sideline coat, full length raincoat, or his hat or something. I don't know what else I really, what else I can do. What else can I find? There's always a few things out there, but I'm, after finding the ice bowl ball, I'm just so satisfied right now. But
you must have just recently added that ice ball to your collection, then.
It was within the last 2 weeks. Yeah.
Okay, that's pretty recent. Wow, impressive.
That's pretty recent. Yeah. So there are things. I'm going after ticket stubs from all the championships. I've got as far back as 44, but I have nothing, earlier than that. So I'm trying to complete that collection. I'm trying to complete my collection of championship programs, and I think I go back to 39 on that.
That's amazing.
I need to, at this point, I'm just trying to complete different niches that I've started. Whether it's pinbacks or programs or championship ticket stubs, and of course, I've left all of the real heavy stuff till the last, because some of this stuff I wish I would have done it 10 years ago when it was affordable, and but everything's that way now with collecting.
Yes.
It's absolutely crazy how the prices have skyrocketed.
Hey, Glenn, I got a quick. Glenn.
Yep.
Quick question. I had a little audio difficulty there. And I got to wrap it up because we're almost out of time. Any final thoughts on your collection or collecting in general?
Well, I think I've wore out my welcome talking about my collection, but you know, I could go on.
Everybody's tired of hearing about Steve Largent cards, so don't worry. I could go on and on about Steve, but I'll let you do that. But you know, as far as collecting goes, Bob and Joe, you know, the one thing that's kind of been fun for me over the last few years, I've had a lot of young collectors contact me, and you know, I've gone out there. I'm on social media. I've got a Facebook page with my collection, and I get a lot of young guys asking me pointers about, hey, you know, my gosh, this is a dream, you know, to look at yours. I want to start something. Where do you think I should start? And I'm getting a kick out of that because I have to, because otherwise, if I look at it that, oh my God, I'm getting old and people are asking me for advice, I'll get depressed. But these guys are coming to me and saying, hey, where do I start on this? What do you recommend? And I'm honest with them. You know, you just have to find something that you have a passion about, whether it's a pennant, whether it's bobbleheads, whether it's photos that are signed, and you just go with it. And as you're able to replace things with more valuable vintage items, then do it. And someday you'll be sitting in a 750 square foot collection that's crazy, you know. So
wow.
So yeah, that's the one thing about collecting that I'm getting a kick out of. I'm enjoying helping the younger guys appreciate it a little bit and understand that it's important to do this.
Good on you. Good on you, Glenn. I like it.
Great sign for the hobby that's happening, because that's what we need. We need young blood in this hobby to take down our collections as we get older. I mean, that's the reality of the situation. And I'm just so glad you made my night with what you just said, because it shows me there's hope for the hobby, and people are out there, young guys and gals are out there wanting the collection, and they want to pick up stuff, and that's wonderful. That really is. That's great.
Yeah. It's a good sign.
And I love
really
Glenn.
Good for the hobby.
Yeah, and Glenn, I loved your story about fair prices. I got to say, when I first got into the hobby, there was a guy who sold a couple cards, and I reached out and just offered him a very, very fair price. And he's like, you know, I got a call from someone 10 minutes before you, because I posted these on some chat room, and the guy just lowballed me, and he goes, it left such a bad taste in my mouth. We ended up doing that deal, another deal. I went and visited him down in Arizona and hung out with the guy. We became good friends, and I personally think that kick-started me getting into the hobby, and just, I don't know, as cheesy as that sounds, it's just that karma really plays forward, and just treating people, you know, as good as you can, you know, even if they don't know any better.
Right.
Well, exactly, and a lot of people don't know better, and boy, I wouldn't want to be the guy that, you know, sitting there buying something for $100 that was worth $2,000 when they found out, because you know, you look like a dog, and nothing's worth that in life. You know, I'd rather have someone in tears because you're giving them great news. You know, I'd rather have it that way. So, you know.
Right.
Glenn, it sounds like you've got keyword spamming, you know, for people to find you. That's enviable of most small companies. So, nice job.
Well, thanks. It's been a fun time here with this collection, so I appreciate it.
Well, Glenn, I'm almost out of time, so I got to wrap it up. I just want everybody to know you're going to be the super collector in our issue 60 in the April spring issue of Gridiron Greats magazine. So be on the lookout for that. Glenn, thank you for being on the show tonight, and I appreciate it. And Brendan and I got to get down there to look at it one day. So
anytime you're here. No.
You never know.
And
I may get those extra miles, and I'll be flying down there. So
let's do it. I'd love it. I would love it. Thanks so much for having me on the show, and we will be in touch. I appreciate it, guys.
Okay. Great.
All right.
Thank you, Glenn.
Bye now.
We're down to 45 seconds. Real quick, we've been sponsored in part by MSB Sports Cards. Check out their website, msbsportscards.com. And BSC Auctions, check out their website, bscauctions.com. Also, Joe, I'm speechless after this show because his collection is amazing. I mean, I don't know.
Like I said.
It's amazing.
Seeing the
really
pictures
amazing.
of that collection, just the way he's got them organized, everything, and it's incredible. What an amazing guest! And what a classy man. I love it.
Exactly. All right, we're out of time. We got 5 seconds, and we'll be. Thank you for listening. We'll be back in March with a couple more shows. Thanks for listening. Good night.
And Bob promises to fix his audio. Thank you, everyone.
Hey there, sports history fan. This is Arnie Chapman, a.k.a. the Football History Dude, and I wanted to thank you for stopping by to listen to another episode here on the Sports History Network. Our podcasters are passionate about uncovering and sharing sports stories from yesteryear. And if you didn't know it already, we have over 30 shows across the network covering all sorts of sports history topics. In fact, here's a glimpse into one of our awesome podcasts here on the network.
Each week, the official Football Learning Academy podcast will take you deep into the history of pro football through interviews with players, coaches, or administrators in the NFL, as well as interviews with Pro Football Hall of Fame selectors, authors, and historians. You'll learn how the game evolved and important moments that shaped the sport into what it is today. And don't miss the Pro Football History Nugget of the Week. Listen to the official Football Learning Academy podcast on the Sports History Network.
How about that? I bet you're super hyped to go listen to that new podcast, right? Well, to learn about this show and all the other podcasts on the network, head over to sportshistorynetwork.com/podcast. Again, that's sportshistorynetwork.com/podcast. Head over there today to find your next favorite sports history podcast.